So I am standing in my very tight little bookshelf corner here because we are coming up on 5 years of nonfiction book club. I'm also going full like microphone, proper like official looking setup today because we're doing something very special to celebrate 5 years of nonfiction book club. And that is March Madness style nonfiction book club brackets. I said that with question mark intonation at the end because I don't actually know anything about like basketball or brackets or just really how any of this works kind of in general. We haven't done every single month for 5 years. We've skipped some months here and there. I think the first time we skipped was like when I left Missoula maybe, and then again when my dad died, and then most recently when Deboki had a whole baby. So like intermittently, but over the course of 5 years, we have read and discussed 40 books together. Or rather, Empire Incorporated, the book that we were discussing on Saturday after this video goes up, that will be our 40th book. I'm not sure who originally suggested the brackets, whether it was like somebody in the chat or Deboki, but shout out to whoever that was. Deboki and I decided that because we have 40 books to discuss and like 20 of them are books that I picked and 20 of them are books that she picked, we might as well just divide it in half and basically I'll make one side of the bracket with the 20 books that I picked, and then she'll make the other side of the bracket with the 20 books that she picked. And then that way in the end, it'll be the best book that I picked and the best book that she picked. This is like a little bit informed by both of us realizing that we would genuinely take it personally and be sad if we had like a final four that was all one person. Self-awareness is good. In spite of my knowing basically nothing about how like brackets are supposed to work, I do have some sense that there should be like conferences and some sort of kind of organization to the stuff. But also it turns out that 20 is like a really annoying number for this purpose. And I drew out the way that I'm going to do this. There's maybe a better way. I'm going to be honest with you. There's maybe a better way. But so what I have here is my 20 books, right? And I'm going to break them down into like 2 groups of 8 and 1 group of 4. And the 1 group of 4 is essentially going to skip around, right? So you have 20 books, which net you 10 winners in the beginning, right? So there's like the big wipeout, and then 2 and 2 and 2 and 2, and then only 1, and then that one will skip. And that, okay, do you see it? Do you see the vision? Do you see? You can tell me in the comments below why this is bad and why we should have done something else. But this is what's happening on my side of the bracket. Maybe Deboki will do something else on her side of the bracket. It actually doesn't really matter, just as long as we both, start out with all 20 of our books and end up with only one that, meets in the middle. So maybe she'll have some other better organization. But this is what I'm doing. And since the whole point here is to be a little like retrospective, look back on the stuff that we did, I figured it would be fun to just record myself doing it, like actually go through this in real time. Another reason that we're doing it this way, where we each build like half of the structure of the thing, is that it's just a lot easier, just to be honest. Like if we were to try to collaborate and build more like mixed groupings, it would just take so much more time. Like trying to come together and actually sort out the groupings as a joint project would just be so much harder. This is a lot of like setup and gimmick for the thing that I actually want to do, which is to just kind of look back on 5 years of doing this book club and all of the different kinds of books we've read and how cool and exciting it is that I have read a bunch of books that I wouldn't have picked up otherwise. I also love the ways in which we have essentially been building our own internal canon. In some of our more recent conversations, we find ourselves referencing, why this book reminds us of some earlier book that we've read. And obviously that is just part of reading widely, reading a lot. The more that you read, the more that your books are sort of in conversation with one another in terms of your own experience. But also in the case of some of the more recently published books, they are actually in conversation with one another. Mood Machine was the book that we did last month, and it directly cites and references the age of surveillance capitalism, right? So like they are actually quite literally in conversation with one another, but also our sort of book club conversation is evolving the more books that we add. I realized that I was actually way too high for you to see all of the books in the frame here, and now I am very low in the frame. It is what it is. We're making it work. The books are currently on the shelf in the order that we read them. I think I'm actually going to go through and just like go through all of them, but only take my books off the shelf. Before I get into trying to actually assemble my categories, I do think it's worth noting that you could probably form some cooler categories if we were mixing them. So like, I don't know, Deboki and I both did a bunch of pop culture books. So I don't know, I like to watch The Girl in the Show. Both of the Emily Nussbaum books actually were Deboki. So she has I Like to Watch, Cue the Sun, Girl in the Show, Mood Machine. Those 4 could be a category of 4, or if you wanted to get it that as like one of the 8, you could also throw in Deboki's reading book, Reader Come Home, and my reading book, Read Dangerously. That gets us up to 6. And let's see, what would I throw in there for 7 and 8? Maybe Personality Brokers, just because I don't 100% know where else to put that. That's like a little bit of a free space choice. And then, The View from Somewhere. And that could get you some sort of like pop culture bracket. I should maybe explain what all of those books are. You could also maybe do like a city sort of theme thing, which is kind of actually mostly just a me thing. But you have The Lonely City by Olivia Lang, The Death and Life of Great American Cities by Jane Jacobs, and then A City on Mars. And then to round it out, I would add Set the Night on Fire, LA in the 60s. And, that's that sort of grouping. But anyway, that's not what we're doing here. We're going through my 20 books. That's the point of this video. And I think that the best way to get started would be to just pull the books out one at a time and tell you what they are, because I'm doing a retrospective here, right? That's the point. The very first book that I picked was The Personality Brokers, The Strange History of Myers-Briggs and the Birth of Personality Testing by Merve Emre. This is, my favorite thing about Nonfiction Book Club is the way that the like substance of the book is sort of like written. It's like right up there, up top. This is literally like the history of how the Myers-Briggs personality test was created. It's both like a very literal history of these two women and how they came to develop this thing in the first place, and the broader context of like what's going on in society at the time, and how, psychology as a discipline is evolving in this moment. And then, the like impacts of the development of personality testing. This one was a real trip. This is actually probably my favorite live stream. It was our very, very first one. And there's ways in which it's kind of messy, but also we were so prepared. We had this intense doc that was several pages long with all these quotes. I had like read other articles that I wanted to talk about. It was, we were really doing the most in a way that we have stopped. We're no longer trying that hard, but I do love this live stream when we were first trying to decide how we were going to do Nonfiction Book Club. Anyway, I can't talk that long about the rest of these, but this was the first one. And then next was Deboki's pick, Superior, The Return of Race Science by Angela Saini. And then I picked The True Tale of America's Opiate Epidemic, Dreamland by Sam Quinones. You will be unsurprised to learn that this is a book about the opioid epidemic. I remember this one being kind of disappointing, but I actually can't tell you why. So after that, Deboki chose The Alchemy of Us by Anissa Ramirez, and then I chose Ghosts in the Schoolyard by Eve L. Ewing. The subtitle on this guy is Racism and School Closings in Chicago's South Side. This book is very micro in its focus, in that it is talking very specifically about a bunch of school closings on the South Side in a very, discrete amount of time. She interviews parents and teachers and school board members, and she talks to a lot of people over the course of covering this story. But it's also very clear in the macro level implications of what is being discussed here, and how racism affects school access and opportunities, and the broader implications of that. I loved this. I'm starting to feel a vague sense of panic that I don't actually remember the details of many of these earlier books so much as just like how I felt about them. And as for this last one, I loved it. So that's great. Anyway, the next book that we read was Deboki's pick, I Contain Multitudes by Ed Yong, The Microbes Within Us and a Grander View of Life. And then I chose this chonky fucking book, The Age of Surveillance Capitalism, The Fight for a Human Future at the New Frontier of Power by Shoshana Zuboff. This guy is probably the book that has lived most rent-free in my head of anything that we've read, and is the thing that I most often I'm like, man, I really want to go back and reread that. But also it's so big and very overwhelming, and it's very dense. Like the writing is dense and kind of a lot to wrap your head around. But basically it is about how surveillance capitalism. I'm trying to figure out how to summarize this in just a couple of words, but I feel like if you're here watching this video, you have some awareness of the ways in which so many of the services that you use on a regular basis are tracking you, and how in many cases the product isn't actually the thing that you're buying or selling, but like you and your data, that is like actually the product of most of the modern internet. And that has like really terrifying implications for society and the future. And yep, that's my best attempt at a summary of this book. I will acknowledge that it is very anxiety-inducing, but I do highly recommend it. After that, we read The End of Everything. We were a lot of anxiety-inducing books here, actually. The End of Everything, Astrophysically Speaking by Katie Mack. And then I chose, oh my God, really, what was I doing? I chose The Managed Heart The Commercialization of Human Feeling by Arlie Russell Hochschild. This is a book that I had to read excerpts of this in undergrad as part of my sociology degree, but I had never actually read it cover to cover. But I had some awareness of it. And for a really long time, one of my biggest internet pet peeves was the misuse of the term emotional labor, like the way that people use emotional labor to talk about their personal relationships and their friendships and like social dynamics that are often just like friendship. I don't know, like being somebody's friend being turned into emotional labor in ways that are just so fucking weird. And like, more importantly, the reason that it is a pet peeve of mine is that emotional labor is a labor term. It's about like, it is labor. Using a labor term to talk about your like shitty friendships is obfuscating and undermining the labor implications. So anyway, this book, which was published in the 80s, I think, 1983. Bam. So this book was published in 1983 is where the term emotional labor was actually coined. And so I picked it as a nonfiction book club book, mostly because I just wanted to make sure that I was better able to like get on my stupid high horse about emotional labor as a term. This is about the way in which service sector jobs in particular are asking people to perform emotion in ways that are like complicated for the self. This is why I brought up when it was published, because I do think that there are ways in which that conversation has evolved tremendously in the last 40 years. But I think it is like important and foundational. I enjoyed this, but this is not a book that I would recommend widely because it is, I think, fundamentally an academic text. My feet are falling asleep. After The Managed Heart, Deboki picked The View from Somewhere, Undoing the Myth of Journalistic Objectivity by Lewis Raven Wallace. This is another one that I loved and that I think about all the time. And then I continued my theme of picking up books from undergrad. This one actually came out when I was in college. There's a way in which in the early days of Nonfiction Book Club, we were kind of going back and forth about what exactly we wanted it to be. I feel like Deboki had a clearer sense of how she was making her picks than I did. Deboki's thing pretty consistently was like, here's a book that I have that I want to read that I don't know if I will get myself to read otherwise. And then every now and then she would do a book that was like, hey, here's an upcoming nonfiction book that I'm interested in. And so I will pick it like later on. That becomes more her MO. I was sort of on that same sort of jam, but I will confess that some part of the appeal of Nonfiction Book Club for me has always been that I just miss grad school. I actually just genuinely miss being assigned some dense, overly complicated academic text that I only half understand and reading it and then coming into class and then, sitting in a room full of other people who also read this complicated thing and like unpacking it together and figuring out, what to take of it from it. Anyway, that's the era of my picks that I think we're in here. So Managed Heart, and now another kind of public education, Race, Schools, the Media, and Democratic Possibilities by Patricia Hill Collins. I'm having the hardest time saying words today. I'm going to have just truly bonkers outtakes of me unable to pronounce anything at all. Once again, the sociologists really nailing it. They tell you exactly what the book is. Like, Race, Schools, the Media, and Democratic Possibilities. Like Ghost in the Schoolyard is about racism and public education. But this also talks a lot about like colorblind racism and like colorblind systems. This was published in 2009. For context, I feel like with sociology books, it's probably always useful to tell you the year that it was published. Anyway, unlike Ghost in the Schoolyard, this is much more macro in its approach. It is about, racism in education and the media more broadly. She also talks a lot about media literacy and the importance of media literacy in schools for essentially creating citizens. I actually tabbed a quote about this. The overarching goal of media literacy should be to help youth move from being passive consumers to active creators of knowledge. The next book we read was, The Mushroom at the End of the World. I forgot about this book. The Mushroom at the End of the World on the Possibility of Life in Capitalist Ruins by Anna Lowenhaupt Singh. This was Deboki's pick. This such a weird little book, but we're moving on because that's a Deboki book, so I can't actually... I gotta move on. The Lonely City by Olivia Lang. Adventures in the Art of Being Alone. I'm gonna be honest, I do not fucking remember what this book is about. When Olivia Lang moved to New York City in her mid-30s, she found herself inhabiting loneliness on a daily basis. Increasingly fascinated by this most shameful of experiences, she began to explore the lonely city by way of art. Moving from Edward Hopper's Nighthawks to Andy Warhol's Time Capsules, from Henry Darger's Hoarding to David, I don't know how to pronounce his last name, I'm so sorry, AIDS activism. Lang only Lang conducts an electrifying investigation into what it means to be alone, illuminating not only the causes of loneliness, but also how it might be resisted and redeemed. This was not what I thought it was going to be. I don't really know what I did think it was going to be. Not expecting it to be quite so much art history and art, like cultural discussion, but wasn't mad about it either. I just lost a nail, but I'm going to persevere because I am so brave. Anyway, the next book that we read was Deboki's pick, The Gene, An Intimate History. This is, I think, the last thing that we read when I was still living in Missoula, and this is the first thing that we read when I moved back to Missouri. I picked The Stonewall Reader, foreword by Edmund White, edited by the New York Public Library. This was a weird and maybe not entirely appropriate pick because it is a collection of many different pieces of writing, not all nonfiction. Like some of this is actually fiction, but it is about Stonewall and queer liberation movements more broadly. So there's it's broken up in sections. There's like a before Stonewall section that has, I don't know, a dozen or so things. Okay, so yesterday I recorded for over an hour and then I finished recording at like 11:30 at night and saw that my memory card had run out of space in the middle of my recording. And so now my space is in chaos. And honestly, not even in the middle of my recording. I actually have like so much. There's so much. You can see actually how much has happened. And you have to assume too that I did a lot of movement with the books between what you last saw and what you're now seeing. Okay, so the books are no longer in the order that we picked them, right? Because I completed the rest of my bracket assembling process. But I am going to continue going through the books. I have my nonfiction book club playlist open on my phone so that I can remember the order. I guess Deboki's books should still be kind of in order. After we read The Stonewall Reader, Deboki's next pick was The Disordered Cosmos by Shonda Prescott Weinstein. And then I chose oh my God, this is so stupid. I chose Paying the Price, College Costs, Financial Aid, and the Betrayal of the American Dream by Sarah Goldrick Rabb. I really don't remember this that well either. I'm going to be honest. This book is about the student debt crisis in America. I actually think I first learned about this book from Hank as part of the discussion around study hall years ago, and how, in addition to the enormous student debt burden that many of us, are carrying, there's a more substantial problem, which is people who took out student loans but did not ever complete the degree, really truly insidious and terrible. And so anyway, just a lot of additional information about, the student debt crisis in the US. And I think that if that is a topic that you would like to learn more about, I would recommend this book. After that, it was Deboki's pick, Reader Come Home, Marianne Wolf. I did not like this book. And then I picked Consumed, which she's got to be around here somewhere. There she is. Consumed by Aja Barber. The Need for Collective Change, Colonialism, Climate Change, and Consumerism. The double change trips me up every time I read it. Anyway, I read this book a bunch of times and I talk about it all the time, so there's really not a lot to say. I love this book and you better fucking read this book. Honestly, read this fucking book, okay? After that, Deboki chose On Immunity. Oh, here it is. I was like, I don't even see it. On Immunity and Inoculation by Eula Biss. And then I chose Culture Warlords by Talia Lavin. My Journey into the Dark Web of White Supremacy. This book, fairly thin, very fast read, but also a very intense and overwhelming read. She went undercover and spent a lot of time in white supremacist forums and chat rooms and just really dark, evil stuff, but also important for understanding the world in which we currently live. After that, Deboki decided to lighten the mood with I Like to Watch by Emily Nussbaum. This was actually a reread for me. This is a fun book. This is just a collection of essays about different TV shows. Sorry, I wasn't explaining Deboki's book, but this is a fun one. And I'm glad that was a fun one because then I picked The Girl in the Show by Anna Fields. This is the only book of the 40 that I never actually finished. I forget how far I got. I rage quit the book. We talked about this in the live stream. I don't want to fucking talk about it. The Girl in the Show, 3 generations of comedy, culture, and feminism. I had such high hopes for this book. I had such high hopes. And you can just watch the live show to hear about how disappointed my dreams were by this stupid book. Deboki fortunately followed that up with another banger, which I know I said I wasn't describing Deboki's books, but The Battle of Versailles by Robin Given. I have to make an amendment to earlier in this video when I was building a hypothetical pop culture bracket. I wouldn't put The Personality Brokers. I would put this. This is the night American fashion stumbled into the spotlight and made history. Fun bomb. And then you chose another academic. I don't know why I do this. Am I allergic to fun? Sorry, I don't want to do that to Jane Jacobs. She has nothing to do with this. The Death and Life of Great American Cities by Jane Jacobs. This is like a, seminal text in the world of like urban planning and how you think about cities. And of all the many like ideas in this book, this is the 50th anniversary edition. One that I do think about all the time is the way in which like mixed use blocks, like not having parts of a city be all residential or all business or whatever is like it's bad to not have things be mixed use. Mixed use is good. I was trying to like get out of the double negatives of that. It's a lot of, great stuff and praise of walkable cities and how to make good cities. And, this one's a classic. So what else is there to say? And Deboki followed that up with Virology, Essays for the Living, the Dead, and the Small Things in Between by Joseph Osmundson. I feel like Deboki's maybe got like a little bit of a disease thing going on here. Autoimmunity, virology, you could include I Contain Multitudes and the Gene too, maybe? I don't know. I don't know what she's going to do. I can't wait to hear what she does, actually. My next pick was Worn, A People's History of Clothing by Sophie Tannhauser, which... it's what it says it is. The framing device of this book is like fabrics themselves. So she starts with linen. There's 2 chapters on linen. There's 3 chapters on cotton, 3 on silk, 3 on synthetics, and 3 on wool. And she's sort of tracing how those fabrics intersect with like society and culture. This book is extremely my jam, but maybe not one that I would recommend widely. I think that if you found that incredibly soft pitch for this book interesting, you would enjoy it. But it's not one like some of these other books where I feel like even if you're not interested in the topic at hand, it's a very, very compelling book that you should pick up. Deboki's next book was How Far the Light Reaches, A Life in 10 Sea Creatures by Sabrina Imbler. She's actually also got a little bit of a memoir thing going here. Like, so this is about 10 sea creatures. She's like talking about these sea creatures. There's a lot of science in it, but then she's interweaving a lot of like personal details about maybe their life. I'm actually now realizing I don't recall this author's pronouns, but this is part memoir. Virology is, and inoculation is, and I think she might have another one too. Anyway, this is my bracket, not hers. But I'm in my flop era, so this is why I'm excited to talk about her books. Because my next book was fucking Bittersweet by Susan Cain, which is another really regrettable pick. I would take it back if I could, but alas, I cannot. So here we are. Bittersweet by Susan Cain, How Sorrow and Longing Make Us Whole. This is another one that I had really high hopes for, and it wound up being more just like rambling thoughts on sorrow. Like, I don't know. I feel like I was expecting it to be more like research oriented than it was. It was vibey in a bad way. I love a vibe. I didn't love this. And then Deboki. Oh, this is another. I don't know if I included this in my list of pop culture books, but I should have. If I didn't, Everything I Need from You, How Fangirls Created the Internet as We Know It by Caitlin Tiffany. What a fun time. I don't really actually remember this book at all, except I remember being so excited to read it, and I do not remember being disappointed by it. So that's what I have to say about that one. I'm violating my own rule about how I was supposed to approach this, because that is actually extremely on brand. That is who I am as a person. My next pick was Read Dangerously, The Subversive Power of Literature in Troubled Times. This good book. The thing that I actually fundamentally remember about this, though, is that it is, she's talking about a bunch of literature, in troubled times, but also like a sort of central framing that's going on here is that she used to talk to her dad a lot about literature, and her dad passed. And so she starts writing letters to her dad. And I think this was maybe less than a year after my dad died, when I was reading this book, and I just felt a lot of feelings. And so that my relationship with this book is not one that I think anybody else will have, but I loved this book. Deboki's next pick was Up to Speed by Christine Yu. I feel like we're getting to the end here. This is about like women in sports, the groundbreaking science of women athletes. And then my next pick was another chonky guy. There he is. Come on. Set the Night on Fire, LA in the 60s. This is a magisterial, riveting movement history of Los Angeles in the 60s. Okay, the thing about this book is she's thick. Okay, I know she's thick, but it is honestly, I feel like, so readable. For like, this is deceptive. Unlike, I don't know where she went, The Age of Surveillance Capitalism, which is about the same size. Let's see. Let's compare them. Let's do a little side by side. I think I just broke a freaking nail. Honestly, it looks like Set the Night on Fire is actually thicker, which is shocking to me to hear because it didn't feel like it feels shorter. Because it's just got a lot of characters. It's like it is focused on cultural movements happening in LA in the 60s. And it's like, taking you through the decade. Because it is so grounded in all of the individual people doing things, it feels more like a story. Deboki and I on the live actually joked about how there's a way in which this book almost feels like you are reading a fantasy novel. Oh, the cover is backwards. It has maps at the front of it, which it needs. It needs maps. And I feel that the only thing that is missing is a list of characters. Anyway, I enjoyed this book and would widely recommend it. I glued back on the nail that I lost last night. This is a new nail that I have lost. So, I'm really giving my all to this process. Deboki's next pick was A City on Mars. Can we settle space? Should we settle space? And have we really thought this through? This book has cartoons, which really missing from our nonfiction book club picks. Shout out to A City on Mars for having cartoons, also for being a fun book. And then I read The Great Displacement by Jake Biddle, Climate Change and the Next American Migration. This book is about the climate crisis and very specifically is talking about different climate emergencies, disasters within the United States and how they have, devastated communities. And we're talking about everything from hurricanes to tornadoes to droughts to floods, and like where entire communities have been displaced. It's talking about the disproportionate impacts of those displacements. So, who gets displaced, whose community gets leveled, whose community gets protected and saved. And then some like really big questions about the future and at what point certain places in this country are, regarded as uninhabitable and like the implications of those decisions and how we make those decisions. This is great. I really, really enjoyed this. Tabbed the hell out of it. Highly recommend. We are almost there, I swear. We're now on this bottom little mini shelf here. Deboki's next pick was Fathoms, The World in the Whale by Rebecca Giggs. And then I chose Anansi's Gold, The Man Who Looted the West, Outfoxed Washington, and Swindled the World by Yapoka Yibo. This I loved. You could hear it in my voice when I got to pick it up. This one's a vibe. I have a lot of like major moral and ethical problems with a lot of true crime, and the way that it is like fetishizing almost people's like real trauma. However, when I read something like Bad Blood, I understand it. I understand what a good and successful true crime book is doing for people when you can set aside the moral implications of it. And this is like that vibe. Like if you're into sort of a scammer story, this does still have kind of like complex implications here. There are certainly people whose lives are profoundly affected. There are moments of darkness in this book. I love that this is like a scammer story that's also kind of like casually teaching people some Ghanaian history. Like there's a way in which this is like a fun scammer book, and then also you're actually learning the history of Western Africa in like the 60s and 70s. I just found this book incredibly engaging and well written, and like the story is super compelling, and also, you know, you'll learn some shit. So highly recommend. And Deboki's second to last book, her last one isn't on my shelf because I don't worry about it. But Deboki picked Cue the Sun, The Invention of Reality TV by Emily Nussbaum. And then my last pick for this video is Mood Machine, The Rise of Spotify and the Cost of the Perfect Playlist by Liz Pelly. I mentioned this book in my most recent video. This is also our most recent live stream, and you should go watch it. This book is about the ways in which Spotify and like a lot of things about the contemporary internet, but Spotify specifically is kind of like stealing from artists and also causing like us as consumers to sort of devalue art, and it's like really fucking up our relationship with art in addition to the way that it is affecting artists' relationship with their work. Highly recommend. This one, in spite of how thin it is I think a little bit denser in the language than some of the others, but I would, if you're here, if you have watched all of this, I feel like you are the kind of person who would enjoy this book. Okay. That's it. I told you about all the books. And now is the part where I have to recreate my little brackets. I don't even know where the fuck my little thing went. But if you'll recall from the beginning of this video, I got to come up with a group of 8, a group of 8, and a group of 4. And I felt like the best way to do this, like my ideal situation, would be some sort of like my favorites are in the group of 4, but I worry about how possible it is to get 2 groups of 8 out of what's left. Because the thing about the group of 4 is that they get to skip around. And I hate the idea of having like 4 books that I feel mid about getting to skip around and being guaranteed a spot in the final 4. Like that feels shitty. But also, these books don't have anything to do with each other. You know, I said at the beginning, oh, they're in conversation. No, I lied. They have nothing to do with each other. I don't know. It's hard. Okay, but if I had to do that, 4 books that deserve a spot in the final 4. Here's the thing though, only one of the 4 books would get a spot in my final 4, you know? But if I had to try to do that, I feel like neither of you two bitches. Mood Machine, maybe. I have somehow managed to, oh, there she is. Okay. Mood Machine, Surveillance Capitalism, Consumed, maybe you, you know, see, actually that's hard. I actually like so many of these. So it's actually not that simple. There's other books that I would maybe want to add to this hypothetically. Oh, you don't go here. You go back up here. So yeah, it's maybe not that simple. I love many of these books for different reasons. I don't 100% remember the place that I landed last night, except I do kind of remember thinking that I had picked a grouping of 4 where I was like, I don't really know that any of these deserve to make the final 4. I had sort of a loose theming going of so Bittersweet, Personality Brokers, The Managed Heart. What was the other one? Who else went there? Somebody else went there, obviously. Oh, yeah. The Lonely City. So I had like a little bit of a, like, this is like an introspection vibe, the introspection bracket. Managed Heart feels maybe dubiously in that category, but, you know, she can go there. She can go there too. So this is maybe a category, the sad girl bracket. Really, actually, if I wanted to do, oh, interesting. Okay. Because there is a version of this that is like moods, almost, or well, no, personality, well, okay, Mood Machine, Lonely, like, I don't know. There's like a half-formed thing that maybe you will understand and maybe you won't. I feel like maybe, just maybe, the vibes bracket. Do you see what I'm doing? Mood Machine, Lonely City, Managed Heart, Bittersweet. I'm going to leave this for right now. And I have to figure out how to divide the remaining 16 books, well, 15, 16 books into 2 stacks. I do feel like there's a strong theme of academics, as in people, in the things that I chose. I feel like trying to decide who gets to be an academic and who isn't is going to be a little fraught and inaccurate. These fucking nerds. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. See, in that case, the Managed Heart would need to go. Are the Personality Brokers a vibe? Can the Personality Brokers stay in the vibes bracket? That is the question. And what is the other bracket? Like, what is the everything else if these are the academics? Most of these other people are journalists, actually. Journalist. But I don't know if Aja Barber would regard herself as a journalist or not. I feel like possibly more activist than journalist, but like she was a blogger. Like I don't know, that doesn't feel like a reach to lump her in here. Azar Nafisi is an academic. The library is an academic. Anna Fields, I guess, is a fucking journalist. What do we have here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. C'est intéressant. Okay, hold on just a minute here. Is there anybody in my stack of academics who don't belong? Maybe. I have no idea. Hold on. Sarah Goldrick-Rab is a professor of higher education policy and sociology at Temple University. So, bam. I correctly categorized her. Jane Jacobs is a category all her own. In terms of the extremely crude categorization that I'm doing here, Jane Jacobs is definitely more of a journalist than an academic. However, this book is now like an important academic text, you know? Like there's a way in which this doesn't really hold. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And then you put the managed heart. Sophie Tannhauser teaches in the writing department at Pratt Institute. You know, I guess I could pull the Stonewall Reader. Okay, so here's the thing. I know I said at the beginning that I don't know shit about like basketball and like conferences and how any of that works, but I am like reasonably sure that it's a thing that in like the broader world of sports that there are conferences that are like East or like whatever, like, you know, that have these sort of distinctions. But then like the politics of how teams wind up in those things doesn't always mean that all the schools themselves are East. I didn't describe that clearly because I don't really know what I'm talking about. And I'm just using this as a shoddy justification for how I'm going to let this ride. I really just want to be done. So I'm committing. And I apologize to anybody who I've offended. If any of these authors ever see that I've called them a journalist or an academic incorrectly, you know, I'm sorry. I did what I did. And here we are. So over here, we have the vibes bracket. And I actually would be okay with anything other than Bittersweet making my final four. This is solid. Do they really make sense? No. But the vibes bracket isn't really promising cohesion, is she? So the vibes bracket consists of The Personality Brokers by Merve Emra, Mood Machine by Liz Pelly, The Lonely City, Adventures in the Art of Being Alone by Olivia Lang, and Bittersweet by Susan Cain. Over here we have the academics bracket. I hope it is in the frame. I'm not entirely sure. It consists of The Managed Heart, The Commercialization of Human Feeling by Arlie Russell Hochschild, The Stonewall Reader, the foreword by Edmund White, and it is edited by the New York Public Library. Read Dangerously, The Subversive Powers of Literature in Troubled Times by Azar Nafisi, Set the Night on Fire, LA in the 60s by Mike Davis and John Weiner, Paying the Price, I actually probably can't keep lifting these up, College Costs Financial Aid, and The Betrayal of the American Dream by Sarah Goldrick-Rab, Eve L. Ewing's Ghosts in the Schoolyard, Racism and School Closings on Chicago's South Side, Another Kind of Public Education, Race, Schools, the Media and Democratic Possibilities by Patricia Hill Collins, and finally, The Age of Surveillance Capitalism, The Fight for a Human Future at the New Frontier of Power by Shoshana Zuboff. And then over here I have the journalist bracket. They're not all journalists. I don't know what else to call them. Suggestions in the comments, welcome. Consumed, The Need for Collective Change, Colonialism, Climate Change, and Consumerism by Aja Barber. Culture Warlords, My Journey into White Supremacy by Talia Lavin. The Great Displacement, Climate Change, and the Next American Migration by Jake Biddle. Anansi's Gold, The Man Who Looted the West, Outfoxed Washington, and Swindled the World. I read that upside down. I'm really proud of myself. By Yipoka Yibo. Dreamland, The True Tale of America's Opiate Epidemic by Sam Quinones. Worn, A People's History of Clothing by Sophie Tannhauser. The 50th anniversary edition of The Death and Life of Great American Cities by Jane Jacobs. And The Girl in the Show, 3 Generations of Comedy, Culture, and Feminism by Anna Fields. There we have it. That's my categories. You can join our live stream this weekend on Deboki's channel where we talk more about this. and you can hear what Deboki's side of it is. What was all of this? What have I been doing? I don't know. Another day has entered the chat because all of this was in fact kind of a mess. While I was editing this over several days, I realized that I forgot to properly contextualize this. All of this was just setting up the brackets, but the next thing that happens is, well, discussing this book, but then also Deboki and I are going to do polls. She's gonna run the polls for her half, and I'm gonna run the polls for my half. And then, you know, like that's how we'll do this in sort of proper March Madness fashion, she says, after having acknowledged repeatedly that she doesn't fully understand how that works. So follow us both on Instagram and also here on YouTube. One of those two places is where you'll see the polls. And then join us on March 22nd at 2 p.m. Eastern Time to discuss Empire Incorporated, the corporations that built British Colonialism by Philip J. Stern. All of this was a mess, but I would sincerely love to talk to you about any of these books. So please let me know in the comments if you loved or hated any of the books that we've discussed for Nonfiction Book Club, any predictions that you have for big winners. I want to hear all your thoughts. So, and please come hang out with us and talk about this book. It doesn't matter if you've read the book, you can still hang out and chat and just learn what the book is about. Okay, bye.